Okay, places everyone. The Pimpernel, scene 1. We'll skip down to Jelly's line. I heard a story last night. Okay. Rick and Lucas, you're up, and Dennis follows. And action.
I heard a story of him last week. It seems he led a duke and all his family safe out of France and across the sea to England.
Well, I never. He's a clever man, whoever he is.
A toast, gentlemen, to that brave Englishman, the Scarlet Pimpernel.
To the Scarlet Pimpernel.
You seem very proud of the exploits of this gentleman, sir. He's a true-blooded Englishman, and being one myself, I am very proud of him. Does anybody have any idea of, who he is?
Not a soul.
Oh, here is my Lord Anthony. Here is my Lord Anthony.
Evening, Jelly Band, old chap. Evening, Mr. Hempseed. Sally, you're growing prettier and prettier every time I see you.
Oh, your lordship. Father, why don't you see if the wine is cool for the company?
Certainly, my dear. Come along, Hempseed.
Well, that was terrible. Come on, people. Can't you do better than this? You're as dull as tombs up there. This is a classic.
Come on, Mr. Phipps.
Come on, nothing. Lucas and Rick, what on earth are you doing up there? Reading the dictionary? Where is your feeling? This is your hero. You look up to this man. He's saving innocent people from a bloodthirsty regime. And Dennis, you're being way too obvious. Scarlet is crafty, sneaky, and the top spy France has to offer. He's as sly as a fox in hen house. Got it?
Okay.
Alright, we'll dip over to the entrance of the Countess. Austin, go. Austin, put on that phone. You're up. Welcome to Old England, Countess. Mademoiselle Suzanne, Monsieur Vicomte.
Ah, messieurs, what can I say? I'm so deeply grateful. I cannot believe we are safe at last. We were taken out of Paris in a filthy market cart full of vegetables.
No. You all just barely escaped with your lives. Don't you get it? You're still shaking with fright. Why would you be smiling? Your father's life is still in jeopardy. Doom's still like at your door. And what happened to all your accents? Go on.
The cart was driven by a fearful old hag. She said her family had the plague, and the sergeant was so terrified he let us go.
How do you know who the old hag was, Mademoiselle? The Scarlet Pimpernel.
Easy too.
I have it on excellent authority.
What a hero, whoever he is.
Cassie and Jerry, that was just disturbing. Where did you get the idea that this was a realistic French accent? Didn't you watch the video I sent everyone?
I watched part of it.
Yeah, me too. Go watch all of it right now. Okay. We're skipping to scene 3. Percy and Marguerite in the garden. Set change, go. Come on. Everybody, come on, let's go. Mark, move that bench.
I'm trying.
Jessica, stop dawdling with that bush.
It's poking me.
Just roll the bush on, leave it. Thank you. And Janice, quit swirling the lights. Woo. Alright, Steve, Jill, bring me the magic.
Percy, I need you.
What can I do for you, madam? No. Jill. Remember, you love this man, but you don't know if he returns it. Steve. You love her, but you can't let her know. Now start over. Action.
Percy, I need you.
What can I do for you, madam?
Percy, Armand is in danger. He is so rash, and one of his letters, a very compromising one, has fallen into the hands of a fanatic. Armand may be guillotined.
So, the murderous dog of the revolution is about to bite the very hands that fed it, eh? Don't cry, my dear. Jill, you're supposed to be crying. Start crying this instant. Percy, back up. So, the murderous dog of the revolution is about to bite the very hands that fed it, eh? Don't cry, my dear. I never could bear to see a pretty woman cry.
Is there anything you can do?
Perhaps you should seek the help of Chauvelin.
I cannot ask her his help, Sir Percy.
Okay. What is wrong with all you people? We've been rehearsing for a month and you're still as bad as the first read-through. Don't you understand? Performances are in 2 weeks. 2 weeks! You are officially the worst class I've ever taught in my 25 years as a drama teacher. What am I going to do with you all? What is that?
Except my phone.
That does it. All phones in this bin right now. Come on, get up here. Go on, put them in. Right now, right now.
Oh, no!
That's not fair.
Come on,
Mr.
Mr.
Phipps. That's not fair, Mr. Phipps.
Phipps.
No one is leaving this auditorium until we've made progress, and I mean progress. Go back to your places and read the entire script over again while I personally call your parents.
We interrupt this message to bring you the Maidens of Green Gables.
Hello, all. Hello. It is week 8, and we only have 2 more weeks to go. It's exciting. So exciting. Also kind of sad.
Yes, terribly.
Very sad. So sad. We'll get over it sad.
How was your all's Thanksgiving? Did you were you able to get together with the family and eat tons of delicious food? What is your all favorite Thanksgiving foods to eat? Did we ask that last week?
Yes, we did.
Oh, well.
Tell us again.
Tell us again. We had our sister and her family over and her 4 boys over for Thanksgiving. So we went on a hayride after we ate our food. It was a lot of fun. And then we came back and the adults played catchphrase, which was quite fun. Very hectic.
Rousing.
It was very
Rousing.
yeah, rousing and loud, which was fun. A lot of fun. So yes, so we are week 8. We only have 2 more weeks left.
I'm trying to convince Grace that we should do Dr. Thorne next.
No!
As a read along.
No, we need to do something. I don't know.
I don't know. I've never read it before, so I wouldn't want to read something that possibly might have a problem, but I would assume that it shouldn't be an issue. But
No, we should do something different. We should do Ivanhoe!
no.
Or Tale of Two Cities!
No.
We've got Catherine refuses to read that book, which is both of them actually, which is very sad. I'm alone in my literary literary reading.
Ambitions.
Yes, whatever it is. Anyways,
So there were multiple books we wanted to do for, this read aloud, but we, due to copyright issues, we realized we couldn't actually do them, so that kind of narrows things down a bit. So,
Indeed.
but do tell us if you have any ideas for our next read along, or if you want us to do a read along again. No, it was terrible.
Or read along, not read aloud. I'm kind of wondering if we shouldn't do this again necessarily.
You're giving up our claim to fate.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, they both have their perks to it. It's easier to express yourself when speaking instead of writing
Yes.
your thoughts. But when you're writing, you have more time to collect those thoughts, to speak of them. Instead of large ums and gaps and gaps.
Gasps. Yes, and I thought the mockery was.
Yes, and shrieks. You guys missed it. We were about to record, and Dad called down to us. We're in the silent room. Now, Dad called down to us, and we both screamed. A very jumpy family. Apparently. Yes, anyways. So I was saying to Cat, it seems like we shriek in every video for whether a cat's clawing us or some other something. Anyways, on to the book. So, we're reading chapters 22 through 25,
24.
through 24. Yes.
You get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Alright, well, this first chapter is entitled Calais. The weariest nights, the longest days, sooner or later must perforce come to an end. Margaret had spent over 15 hours in such acute mental torture as well-nigh drove her crazy. After a sleepless night, she rose early, wild with excitement, dying to start on her journey, terrified lest further obstacles lay in her way. She rose before anyone else in the house was astir, so frightened was she, lest she should miss the one golden opportunity of making a start. When she came downstairs, she found Sir Andrew Ffoulkes sitting in the coffee-room. He had been out half an hour earlier and had gone to the Admiralty Pier, only to find that neither the French packet nor any privately chartered vessel could put out of Dover yet. The storm was then at its fullest, and the tide was on the turn. If the wind did not abate or change, they would perforce have to wait another 10 or 12 hours until the next tide, before a start could be made. And the storm had not abated, the wind had not changed, and the tide was rapidly drawing out. Marguerite felt the sickness of despair when she heard this melancholy news. Only the most firm resolution kept her from totally breaking down, and thus adding to the young man's anxiety, which evidently was becoming very keen. Though he tried to disguise it, Marguerite could see that Sir Andrew was just as anxious as she was to reach his comrade and friend. This enforced inactivity was terrible to both of them. How they spent that wearisome day at Dover, Marguerite could never afterwards say. She was in terror of showing herself lest Chauvelin's spies happened to be about. She had a private sitting room, and she and Sir Andrew sat there hour after hour, trying to take at long intervals some perfunctory meals, whereas little Sally would bring them, with nothing to do but to think, to conjecture, and occasionally, and only occasionally, to hope. The storm had abated just too late. The tide was by then too far out to allow a vessel to put off to sea. The wind had changed and was settling down to a comfortable northwesterly breeze, a veritable godsend for a speedy passage across to France. And there those two waited, wondering if the hour would ever come when they could finally make a start. There had been one happy interval in this long weary day, and that was when Sir Andrew went down once again to the pier, and presently came back to tell Marguerite that he had chartered a quick schooner, whose skipper was ready to put out to sea the moment the tide was favourable. From that moment the hours seemed less wearisome, there was less hopelessness in the waiting, and at last, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Marguerite, closely veiled and followed by Sir Andrew Ffoulkes, who, in the guise of her lackey, was carrying a number of impedimenta, found her way down to the pier. Once on board, the keen, fresh sea air revived her. The breeze was just strong enough to nicely swell the sails of the foam crest, as she cut her way merrily towards the open. The sunset was glorious after the storm, and Marguerite, as she watched the white cliffs of Dover gradually disappearing from view, felt more at peace and once more almost hopeful. Sir Andrew was full of kind attentions, and she felt how lucky she had been to have him by her side in this her great trouble. Gradually the grey coast of France began to emerge from the fast-gathering evening mists. One or two front lights could be seen flickering, and the spires of several churches to rise out of the surrounding haze. Half an hour later Marguerite had landed upon French shore. She was back in the country where this very moment men slaughtered their fellow creatures by the hundreds, and sent innocent women and children in the thousands to the block. The very aspect of the country and its people, even in this remote sea-coast town, spoke of that seething revolution 300 miles away in beautiful Paris, now rendered hideous by the constant flow of blood of her noblest sons, by the wailing of the widows and of the cries of the fatherless children. The men all wore red caps in various stages of cleanliness, but all with the tricolour cockade pinned on the left-hand side. Marguerite noticed with a shudder that, instead of a laughing, merry countenance habitual to her own countrymen, the faces now invariably wore a look of sly distrust. Every man nowadays was a spy upon his fellows. The most innocent word uttered in jest might at any time be brought up as proof of aristocratic tendencies, or of treachery against the people. Even the women went about with a curious look of fear and of hate looking in their brown eyes, and all watched Marguerite as she stepped on shore, followed by Sir Andrew, and muttered as she passed along, "Sacré aristos," or else "Sacré Anglais." Otherwise, their presence excited no further comment. Calais, even in those days, was in constant business communication with England, and English merchants were often to be seen on this coast. It was well known that in view of the heavy duties in England, a vast deal of French wines and brandies were smuggled across. This pleased the French bourgeois immensely. He liked to see the English government and the English king, both of whom he hated, cheated out of their revenues, and an English smuggler was always a welcome guest for the tumble-down taverns of Calais and Boulogne. So, perhaps, as Sir Andrew gradually directed Marguerite through the tortuous streets of Calais, many of the population, who turned with an oath to look at the strangers clad in the English fashion, thought that they were bent on purchasing dutiable articles of their own fog-ridden country, and gave them no more than a passing thought.
Marguerite, however, wondered how her husband's tall, massive figure could have passed through Calais unobserved. She marveled what disguise he assumed to do his noble work without exciting too much attention. Without exchanging more than a few words, Sir Andrew was leading her right across the town to the other side from that where they had landed, in the way towards Cap Gris-Nez. The streets were narrow, tortuous, and mostly evil-smelling, with a mixture of stale fish and damp cellar odors. There had been heavy rain here during the storm last night, and sometimes Marguerite sank ankle-deep in the mud, for the roads were not lighted save for the occasional glimmer found from a lamp inside a house. But she did not heed any of these petty discomforts. "We may meet Blakeney at the Chagris," Sir Andrew had said, when they landed, and she was walking as if on a carpet of rose-leaves, for she was going to meet him almost at once. At last they reached their destination. Sir Andrew evidently knew the road, for he had walked unerringly in the dark, and had not asked his way from anyone. It was too dark then for Marguerite to notice the outside aspect of this house. The Chagris, as Sir Andrew had called it, which, by the way, side note, is the grey cat, which I looked that up, was evidently a small wayside inn on the outskirts of Calais, and on the way to Gris-Nez. It lay some little distance from the coast, for the sound of the sea seemed to come from afar. Sir Andrew knocked at the door with the knob of his cane, and from within Marguerite heard a sort of grunt and the muttering of a number of oaths. Sir Andrew knocked again, and this time more peremptorily. More oaths were heard, and then shuffling steps seemed to draw near the door. Presently this was thrown open, and Marguerite found herself on the threshold of the most dilapidated, most squalid room she had ever seen in all her life. The paper, such as it was hanging from the wall in strips. There did not seem to be a single piece of furniture in the room that could, by the wildest stretch of imagination, be called whole. Most of the chairs had broken backs, others had no seats in them. One corner of the table was propped up under a bundle of faggots, there where the fourth leg had been broken. In one corner of the room there was a huge hearth, of which hung a stock-pot, with a not altogether unpalatable odour of hot soup emanating therefrom. On one side of the room, high up in the wall, there was a species of loft, before which hung a tattered blue and white checked curtain. A rickety set of steps led up to this loft. On the great bare walls, with their colourless paper, all stained with varied filth, there were chalked up at intervals with great bold characters the words "Liberty, Equality, Fraternity." The whole of this sordid abode was dimly lighted by an evil-smelling oil lamp which hung from the rickety rafters of the ceiling.
An evil-smelling.
It all looked so horribly squalid, so dirty and uninviting, that Margaret hardly dared to cross the threshold. Sir Andrew, however, had stepped unhesitatingly forward. "English traveller, citizen," he said boldly, and speaking in French. The individual who had come to the door in response to Sir Andrew's knock, and who, presumably, was the owner of this squalid abode, was an elderly, heavily built peasant, dressed in a dirty blue blouse, heavy sabots from which wisps of straw protruded all around, shabby blue trousers, and the inevitable red hat with the tricoloured cockade that proclaimed his momentary political views. He carried a short wooden pipe, from which the odour of rank tobacco emanated. He looked with some suspicion and a great deal of contempt at the two travellers, muttered "Sacré Anglais," and... Is that really how you say that?
I don't know, just angry.
And no, the other word. Anyways. And spat upon the ground to further show his independence of spirit, but nevertheless he stood aside and let them enter, no doubt well aware that these same Sacré Anglais always had well-filled purses. "Oh, Lud!" said Margaret, as she advanced into the room, holding her handkerchief to her dainty nose. "What a dreadful hole! Are you sure this is the place?" "Aye, it is the place, sure enough," replied the young man, as, with his lace-edged fashionable handkerchief, he dusted a chair for Margaret to sit on. "But I vow you I never saw a more villainous hole." "Faith," she said, looking round with some curiosity and a great deal of horror at the dilapidated walls, the broken chairs, the rickety table, "it certainly does not look inviting." The landlord of the Chagris, by name Brogard, had taken no further notice of his guests. He concluded that presently they would order supper, and in the meanwhile it was not for a free citizen to show deference or even courtesy to anyone, however smartly they might be dressed. By the hearth sat a huddled-up figure, clad seemingly mostly in rags. Well, that figure was apparently a woman, although even Although even that would have been hard to distinguish except for the cap, which had once been white, and for what looked like the semblance of a petticoat. She was sitting mumbling to herself, and from time to time stirring the brew in her stock-pot. "Hey, my friend," said Sir Andrew at last, "we should like some supper. The citizen here, he added, pointing to a huddled-up bundle of rags by the hearth, is concocting some delicious soup, I'll warrant. My mistress has not tasted food for several hours." It took Brogart some few moments to consider the question, as a free citizen does not respond too readily to the wishes of those who happen to require something from him. "Sacré aristos," he murmured, and once more spat upon the ground. Then he went very slowly to a dresser which stood in a corner of the room. From this he took an old pewter soup tureen. Is pewter how you say that?
Pewter, yeah.
Soup tureen, and slowly and without a word he handed it to his better half, who, in the same silence, began filling the tureen with the soup out of her stock-pot. Marguerite had watched all these preparations with absolute horror. Were it not for the earnestness of her purpose, she would incontinently have fled from this abode of evil smells and dirt. "Faith, our host and hostess are not your people," said Sir Andrew, seeing the look of horror on Margaret's face. "I would I could offer you a more hearty and more appetizing meal, but I think you will find the soup eatable and the wine good. These people wallow in dirt, but live well as a rule." "Nay, I pray you, Sir Andrew," said gently, "be not anxious about me. My mind is scarce inclined to dwell upon thoughts of supper." Brogard was slowly pursuing his gruesome preparations. He had placed a couple of spoons, also 2 glasses on the table,
His gruesome preparations.
both of which Sir Andrew took the precaution of wiping carefully. Brogard had also produced a bottle of wine and some bread. Margaret made an effort to draw her chair to the table, and to make some pretence at eating. Sir Andrew, as befitting his role of lackey, stood behind her chair. "Nay, madam, I pray you," he said, seeing that Margaret was quite unable to eat, "I beg of you to try and swallow some food. Remember, you have need of all your strength." The soup certainly was not bad. It smelt and tasted good. Marguerite might have enjoyed it, but for the horrible surroundings. She broke the bread, however, and drank some of the wine. "Nay, Sir Andrew," she said, "I do not like to see you standing. You have need of food as much as I have. This creature will only think that I am an eccentric Englishwoman, eloping with her lackey, if you'll sit down and partake of the semblance of the supper beside me." Indeed, Brogard, having placed what was strictly necessary upon the table, seemed not to trouble himself any further about his guests. The Mayor, Brogard, had quietly shuffled out of the room, and the man stood and lounged about, smoking his evil-smelling pipe, sometimes under Margaret's very nose, as any free-born citizen who is anybody's equal should do. "Confound the brute!" said Sir Andrew, with native British wrath, as Brogard leant up against the table, smoking and looking down superciliously at these 2 sacrés Anglais. "In heaven's name, man," admonished Margaret hardly, seeing that Sir Andrew, with British-born instinct, was ominously clenched his fist. "Remember that you are in France, and that in this year of grace this is the temper of the people." "I like to scrag the brute," muttered Sir Andrew savagely. He had taken Margaret's advice, and sat down to her at table, next to her at table, and they were both making noble efforts to deceive one another by pretending to eat and drink. "I pray you," said Marguerite, "keep the creature in a good temper, so that he may answer the questions we must put to him." "I'll do my best, but begad, I'd sooner scrag him than question him. Hey, my friend," he said presently, in French, and tapping Brogard lightly on the shoulder. "Do you see many of our quality along these parts? Many English travellers, I mean?" Brogard looked round at him over his near shoulder, and puffed away at his pipe for a moment or two, as he was in no hurry, then muttered, "Phew, sometimes." "Ah," said Sir Andrew carelessly, "English travellers always know where they can get the good wine, eh, my friend? Now, tell me, my lady was desiring to know if by any chance you happen to have seen a great friend of hers, an English gentleman, who often comes to Calais on business. He is tall, and recently was on his way to Paris. The lady hoped to have met him in Calais." Marguerite tried not to look at Brogard, lest she should betray before him the burning anxiety with which she waited for his reply. But a free-born French citizen is never in any hurry to answer questions. Brogard took his time, then he said very slowly, "Tall Englishman? Today? Yes. You have seen him?" asked Sir Andrew carelessly. "Yes, today," muttered Brogard sullenly. Then he quietly took Sir Andrew's hat from a chair close by, put it on his own head, tugged at his dirty blouse, and generally tried to express in pantomime that the individual in question wore very fine clothes. "Sacré aristo!" he muttered, "that tall Englishman." Margaret could scarce repress a scream. "It's the Percy right enough," she murmured, "and not even in disguise." She smiled in the midst of all her anxiety, and through her gathering tears at thought of the ruling passion strong in death, of Percy running into the wildest, maddest dangers, with the latest cut coat upon his back and the lace of his jabot unruffled. Oh, the foolhardiness of it, she sighed. Quick, Sir Andrew, ask the man when he went. When he went. Ah, yes, my friend, said Sir Andrew, addressing Brogard with the same assumption of carelessness. My lord always wears beautiful clothes. A tall Englishman you saw was certainly my lady's friend, and he has gone, you say. He went, yes, but he is coming back. Here, he orders supper. Sir Andrew put his hand with a quick gesture of warning upon Margaret's arm. It came none too soon, for the next moment her wild, mad joy would have betrayed her. He was safe and well, and was coming back here presently. She would see him in a few moments, perhaps. Oh, the wildness of her joy seemed almost more than she could bear. Here, she said to Brogard, who had seemed suddenly to have been transforming her eyes into some heaven-born messenger of bliss. Here, did you say the English gentleman was coming back here? The heaven-born messenger of bliss spat upon the floor to express contempt for all and sundry aristos who chose to haunt the Chagris. Phew, he muttered. He orders supper. He will come back. Sacre Anglais, he added, by way of protest against all this fuss from a mere Englishman. But where is he now, do you know? She asked eagerly, placing her dainty white hand upon the dirty sleeve of his blue blouse. He went to get a horse and a cart, said Brogard, laconically, as with a surly gesture he shook off from his arm the pretty hand which Princess had been proud to kiss. But what time did he go? But Brogard had evidently had enough of these questionings. He did not think it was fitting for a citizen who was the equal of anybody to be thus catechized by these Sacres aristos, even though they were rich English ones. It was distinctly more fitting to his newborn dignity to be as rude as possible. It was a sure sign of servility to meekly reply to civil questions. I don't know, he said surlily. I have said enough. Voyons, the aristos. He came today. He ordered supper. He went out. He'll come back. Voila! And with this parting attestation of his rights as a citizen and a free man, to be as rude as he well pleased, Brogard shuffled out of the room, banging the door behind him. And Catherine shall read the next chapter.
Hope. Faith, madam, said Sir Andrew, seeing that Margaret seemed desirous to call her surly host back again, I think we'd better leave him alone. We shall not get anything more out of him, and we might arouse his suspicions. One never knows what spies may be lurking round these god-forsaken places. What care I, she replied lightly. Now I know that my husband is safe, and that I shall see him almost directly. Hush, he said in genuine alarm, for she had talked quite loudly in the fullness of her glee. The very walls have ears in France these days. He rose quickly from the table and walked around the bare, squalid room, listening attentively to the door, through which Brogard had just disappeared, and whence only muttered oaths and shuffling footsteps could be heard. He also ran up the rickety steps that led to the attic to assure himself that there was no spies of Chauvelin about the place. I'll be alone, monsieur, my lackey, said Margaret gaily, as the young man once more sat down beside her. May we talk? As cautiously as possible, he entreated. Faith, man, do you wear a glum face? As for me, I could dance with joy. Surely there is no longer any crest for fear. Our boat is on the beach. The foam crest not 2 miles out to sea. My husband will be here, under this very roof, within the next half hour, perhaps. Sure, there is naught to hinder us. Chauvelin's gang have not yet arrived. Nay, madam, that I fear we do not know. What do you mean? He was at Dover at the same time that we're here. Held up by the same storm which kept us from starting. Exactly. But I did not speak of it before, for I feared to alarm you. I saw him on the bench not 5 minutes before we embarked. At least I swore to myself at the time that it was him. He was disguised as a cure, so that Satan, his own guardian, could scarce have known him. But I heard him then bargaining for a vessel to take him swiftly to Calais, and he must have set sail less than an hour after we did. Margaret's face had quickly lost the look of its joy. The terrible danger in which Percy stood, now that he was actually on French soil, became suddenly and horribly clear to her. Charlotte was close upon his heels, here in Calais, the astute diplomatist that was all-powerful. A word from him, Percy could be tracked and arrested, and every drop of blood seemed to freeze in her veins. Not even during the moments of her wildest anguish in England had she so completely realized the imminence of the peril in which her husband stood. Chauvelin had sworn to bring the Pimpernel to the guillotine, and now the daring plotter, whose anonymity hitherto had been his safeguard, stood revealed through her own hand to his most bitter, most relentless enemy. Chauvelin, when he waylaid Lord Tony and Sir Andrew Ffoulkes in the coffee room of the Fisherman's Rest, had obtained possession of all the plans of this latest expedition. Armand St-Just, the Comte de Tony, and the other fugitive royalists were to have met the Pimpernel, or rather, as it had been originally arranged, 2 of his emissaries on this day, the 2nd of October, at a place evidently known to the League and vaguely alluded to as the Père Blancard's hut. Armand, whose connection with the Pimpernel and disavowal of the brutal policy of the Reign of Terror was still unknown to his countrymen, had left England a little more than a week ago, carrying with him the necessary instructions which would enable him to meet the other fugitives and to convey them to this place of safety. This much Marguerite had fully understood from the first, and Sir Andrew Ffoulkes had confirmed her surmises. She knew, too, that when Sir Percy realized that his own plans and his plans to his lieutenants had been stolen by Chauvelin, it was too late to communicate with Armand or to send fresh instructions to the fugitives. They would, of necessity, be at the appointed time and place, not knowing how grave was the danger which now awaited their brave rescue. Blakeney, who as usual had planned and organized the whole expedition, would not allow any of his younger comrades to run the risk of almost certain capture. Hence his hurried note to them at Lord Grenville's ball: "Start myself tomorrow, alone." And now, with his identity known to his most bitter enemy, his every step would be dodged. The moment he set foot in France, he would be tracked by Chauvelin's emissaries, followed until he reached that mysterious hut where the fugitives were waiting for him, and there the trap would be closed on him and on them. There was but 1 hour, that hour's start which Marguerite and Sir Andrew had of their enemy, in which to warn Percy of the imminence of his danger, and to persuade him to give up the foolhardy expedition, which could only end in his own death. But there was that 1 hour. "Chauvelin knows of this inn from the papers he stole," said Sir Andrew earnestly, "and on landing will make straight for it." "He has not landed yet," she said. "We have an hour's start in him, and Percy will be here directly. We shall be mid-channel ere Chauvelin has realized that we have slipped through his fingers." She spoke excitedly and eagerly, wishing to infuse into her young friend some of that buoyant hope which still clung to her heart, but he shook his head sadly. "Silent again, Sir Andrew?" she said with some impatience. "Why do you shake your head and look so glum?" "Faith, madam," he replied, "'tis only because in making your rose-colored plans you are forgetting the most important factor." "What in the world do you mean? I am forgetting nothing. What factor do you mean?" she added with more impatience. "It stands 6 foot odd high," replied Sir Andrew quietly, "and hath name Sir Percy Blakeney." "I don't understand," she murmured. "Do you think that Blakeney could leave Calais without having accomplished what he set out to do?" "You mean, there's the old Comte de Tournay." "The Comte?" she murmured. "And Saint-Just, and others." "My brother!" she said with a heartbroken sob of anguish. "Heaven help me, but I fear I had forgotten." Fugitives as they are, these men at this moment, await with perfect confidence and unshaken faith the arrival of the Pimpernel, who has pledged his honor to take them safely across the Channel. Indeed, she had forgotten. With the sublime selfishness of a woman who loves with her whole heart, she had in the last 24 hours had no thought save for him. His precious, noble life, his danger, he the loved one, the brave hero, he alone dwelt in her mind. "My brother," she murmured, as one by one the heavy tears gathered in her eyes, as memory came back to her of Armand, the companion and darling of her childhood, the man for whom she had committed the deadly sin, which had so helplessly imperiled her brave husband's life. Sir Percy Blakeney would not be the trusted, honoured leader of a score of English gentlemen, said Sir Andrew proudly, if he abandoned those who placed their trust in him. As for breaking his word, the very thought is preposterous. There was silence for a moment or two. Margaret had buried her face in her hands, and was letting the tears slowly trickle through her trembling fingers. The young man said nothing. His heart ached for this beautiful woman in her awful grief. All along he had felt the terrible impasse in which her own rash act had plunged them all. He knew his friend and leader so well, with his reckless daring, his mad bravery, his worship of his own word of honor. Sir Andrew knew that Blakeney would brave any danger, run the wildest risks sooner than break it, and with Chauvelin at his very heels, would make a final attempt, however desperate, to rescue those who trusted in him. "Faith, Sir Andrew," said Margaret at last, making further efforts to dry her tears, "you are right, and I would not now shame myself by trying to dissuade him from doing his duty. As you say, should plead in vain. God grant him strength and ability," she added fervently and resolutely, "to outwit his pursuers. He will not refuse to take you with him, perhaps, when he starts on his noble work. Between you will have cunning as well as valor. God guard you both. God guard you both. In the meanwhile, I think we should lose no time. I still believe that his safety depends upon his knowing that Chauvelin is on his track. Undoubtedly. He has wonderful resources at his command. As soon as he is aware of his danger, he will exercise more caution. His ingenuity is a veritable miracle. Then what say you to avoid your reconnaissance in the village whilst I wait here against his coming? You might come across Percy's track and thus save valuable time. If you find him, tell him to beware. His bitterest enemy is on his heels. But this is such a villainous hole for you to wait in. Nay, that I do not mind. But you might ask our surly host if he would let me wait in another room, where I could be safer from the prying eyes of any chance traveller. Offer him some ready money, so that he should not fail to give me word the moment the tall Englishman returns." She spoke quite calmly, even cheerfully now, thinking out her plans. Ready for the worst if need be, she would show no more weakness. She would prove herself worthy of him who was about to give his life for the sake of his fellow men. Sir Andrew obeyed her without further comment. Instinctively he felt that hers now was the stronger mind. He was willing to give himself over to her guidance, to become the hand whilst she was the directing head. He went to the door of the inner room, through which Brogard and his wife had disappeared before, and knocked as usual. He was answered by a salvo of muttered oaths. "Hey, friend Brogard," said the young man peremptorily. "My lady would wish to rest here a while. Could you give her the use of another room? She would wish to be alone." He took some money out of his pocket and allowed it to jingle significantly in his hand. Brogard had opened the door and listened with his usual surly apathy to the young man's request. At the sight of gold, however, his lazy attitude relaxed slightly, and he took his pipe from his mouth and shuffled into the room. He then pointed over his shoulder at the attic up in the wall. "She can wait up there," he said with a grunt. "It's comfortable, and I have no other room." "Nothing could be better," said Margaret in English. She at once realized the advantages such a position hidden from view would give her. "Give him the money, Sir Andrew. I shall be quite happy up there, and can see everything without being seen." She nodded to Brogard, who condescended to go up to the attic and to shake the straw that lay on the floor. "May I entreat you, madam, to do nothing rash," said Sir Andrew, as Marguerite prepared in her turn to ascend the rickety flight of steps. "Remember, this place is infested with spies. Do not, I beg of you, reveal yourself to Sir Percy, unless you are absolutely certain that you are alone with him." Even as he spoke, he felt how unnecessary this caution. Marguerite was as calm, as clear-headed as any man. There was no fear of her doing anything that was rash. "Nay," she said, with a slight attempt at cheerfulness, "that can I faithfully promise you. I would not jeopardize my husband's life, nor yet his plans, by speaking to him before strangers. Have no fear, I will watch my opportunity and serve him in the manner I think he needs it most." Brogard had come down the steps again, and Marguerite was ready to go up to her safe retreat. "I dare not kiss your hand, madam," said Sir Andrew, as she began to mount the steps, "since I am your lackey, but I pray you to be of good cheer. If I do not come across Blakeney in half an hour, I shall return, expecting to find him here." "Yes, that will be best. We can afford to wait for half an hour. Chauvelin cannot possibly be here before that. God grant that either you or I may have seen Percy by then. Good luck to you, friend. Have no fear for me." Lightly she mounted the rickety wooden steps that led to the attic. Beauregard was taking no further heed of her. She could make herself comfortable there or not as she chose. Sir Andrew watched her until she had reached the loft and sat down upon the straw. She pulled the tattered curtains across, and the young man noted that she was singularly well placed there, for seeing and hearing whilst remaining unobserved. He had paid Beauregard well. The surly old innkeeper would have no object in betraying her. Then Sir Andrew repaired to go. At the door he turned once again and looked up at the loft. Through the ragged curtains Marguerite's sweet face was peeping down at him, and the young man rejoiced to see that it looked serene and even gently smiling. With a final nod of farewell to her, he walked out into the night.
Oh my. Oh, read ahead. Shame.
Alright, we're in for it. This chapter's entitled The Death Trap. The next quarter of an hour went by swiftly and noiselessly. In the room downstairs, Beauregard had for a while busied himself clearing the table and rearranging it for another guest. It was because she watched his preparations that Marguerite found the time slipping by more pleasantly. It was for purchase that this assemblage of supper was being got ready. Evidently, Beauregard had a certain amount of respect for the tall Englishman, as he seemed to be take some trouble in making the place look a trifle less uninviting than it had done before. He even produced from some hidden recesses in the old dresser what actually looked like a tablecloth. And when he spread it out and saw it was full of holes, he shook his head dubiously for a while, then was at much pains so to spread it over the table as to hide most of his blemishes. Then he got out a serviette, also old and ragged, but possessing some measure of cleanliness, and with this he carefully wiped the glasses and spoons and plates which he put on the table. Marguerite could not help smiling to herself as she watched all these preparations, which Beauregard accomplished to an accompaniment of muttered oaths. Clearly the great height and bulk of the Englishman, or perhaps the weight of his fist, had overawed this free-born citizen of France, or he would never have been at such trouble for any sacré aristo. When the table was set, such as it was, Beauregard surveyed it with evident satisfaction. He then dusted one of the chairs with the corner of his blouse, gave a stir to the stock-pot, threw a fresh bundle of faggots onto the fire, and slouched out of the room. Margaret was left alone with her reflections. She had spread a travelling cloak over the straw, and was sitting fairly comfortably, as the straw was fresh, and the evil odours from below came up to her only in a modified form. But momentarily she was almost happy. Happy because when she peeped through the tattered curtains, she could see a rickety chair, a torn tablecloth, a glass, a plate, and a spoon, and that was all. But those mute and ugly things seemed to say to her that they were waiting for Percy, that soon, very soon, he would be here, that the squalid room being still empty, they would be alone together. That thought was so heavenly that Marguerite closed her eyes in order to shut out everything but that. In a few minutes she would be alone with him. She would run down the ladder and let him see her, then he would take her in his arms, and she would let him see that after that she would gladly die for him, and with him, for earth could hold no greater happiness than that. And then what would happen? She could not even remotely conjecture. She knew, of course, that Sir Andrew was right, that Percy would do everything he had set out to accomplish, that she, now she was here, could do nothing beyond warning him to be cautious, since Chauvelin himself was on his track. After having cautioned him, she would perforce have to see him go off upon his terrible and daring mission. She could not even with a word or look attempt to keep him back. She would have to obey whatever he told her to do, even perhaps to efface herself and wait in indescribable agony, whilst he perhaps went to his death. But even that seemed less terrible to bear than the thought that he would never know how much he loved him. That at any rate would be spared her. The squalid room itself, which seemed to be waiting for him, told her that he would be here soon. Suddenly her oversensitive ears caught the sound of distant footsteps drawing near. Her heart gave a wild leap of joy. Was it Percy at last? No, the step did not seem quite as long or sound quite as firm as his. She also thought that she could hear two distinct sets of footsteps. Yes, that was it. 2 men were coming this way. 2 men, strangers perhaps, to get a drink, or But she had not time to conjecture, for presently there was a peremptory call at the door, and the next moment it was violently thrown open from the outside, whilst a rough, commanding voice shouted, "Hey, Citizen Beauregard! Hola!" Marguerite could not see the newcomers, but through the hole in one of the curtains she could observe one portion of the room below. She heard Beauregard's shuffling footsteps as he came out of the inner room, muttering his usual string of oaths. On seeing the strangers, however, he paused in the middle of the room, well within range of Marguerite's vision, looked at them with even more withering contempt than he had bestowed upon his former guests, and muttered, "Sacré Soutane!" Marguerite's heart seemed all at once to stop beating. Her eyes, large and dilated, had fastened on one of the newcomers, who at this point had taken a quick step forward towards Beauregard. He was dressed in the soutane, broad-brimmed hat, and buckled shoes habitual to the French cure. But as he stood opposite the innkeeper, he threw open his soutane for a moment, displaying the tricolour scarf for officialism, which sight immediately had the effect of transforming Beauregard's attitude of contempt into one of cringing obsequiousness. It was the sight of this French cure which seemed to freeze the very blood in Marguerite's veins. She could not see his face, which was shaded by his broad-brimmed hat, but she recognized the thin, bony hands, the slight stoop, the whole gait of the man. It was Chauvelin. The horror of the situation struck her as with a physical blow. The awful disappointment, the dread of what was to come, made her very senses reel, and she needed almost superhuman effort not to fall senseless beneath it all. "A plate of soup and a bottle of wine," said Chauvelin imperiously to Beauregard. "Then clear out of here. Understand? I want to be alone." Silently, and without any muttering this time, Beauregard obeyed. Chauvelin sat down at the table which had been prepared for the tall Englishman, and the innkeeper busied himself obsequiously around him, dishing up the soup and pouring out the wine. The man who entered with Chauvelin, and whom Marguerite could not see, stood waiting close by the door. At a brusque sign from Chauvelin, Beauregard had hurried back to the inner room, and the former now beckoned to the man who had accompanied him. In him Marguerite had once recognized Desgas, Chauvelin's secretary and confidential factotum, whom she had often seen in Paris in the days gone by. He crossed the room and for a moment or two listened attentively at the Beauregard's door. "Not listening?" asked Chauvelin curtly. "No, citizen." For a second Marguerite dreaded lest Chauvelin should order Degas to search the place. What would happen if she would be discovered, she hardly dared imagine. Fortunately, however, Chauvelin seemed more impatient to talk to his secretary than afraid of spies, for he called Degas quickly back to his side. "The English schooner?" he asked. "She was lost sight of at sundown, citizen," replied Degas. "It was then making west towards Cap Grisnez." "Ah, good," muttered Chauvelin. "And now about Captain Gently. What did he say?" "He assured me that all the orders you sent him last week had been implicitly obeyed. All the roads which converge to this place have been patrolled night and day ever since, and the beach and cliffs have been most rigorously searched and guarded." "Does he know where this Pierre Blanchard's hut is?" "No, citizen, nobody seems to know of it by that name. There are any amount of fishermen huts all along the coast, of course, but—" "That'll do. What about tonight?" interrupted Chauvelin impatiently. "The roads and the beaches are patrolled as usual, citizen, and Captain Gently awaits further orders." "Go back to him at once, then. Tell him to send reinforcements to the various patrols, and especially to those along the beach. You understand?" Chauvelin spoke curtly and to the point, and every word he uttered struck at Marguerite's heart like the death knell of her fondest hopes. "The men," he continued, "are to keep the sharpest possible lookout for any stranger who may be walking, riding, or driving along the road."
What were you saying about shrieking and every...
Yeah.
The pin this time.
The men, he continued, are to keep the sharpest possible lookout for any stranger who may be riding, walking, or driving along the road or the beach, more especially for a tall stranger, whom I need not describe further, as probably he will be disguised, but he cannot very well disguise his height except by stooping. You understand?" "Perfectly, citizen," replied Degas. "As soon as any of the men have sighted a stranger, 2 of them are to keep him in view. The man who loses sight of a tall stranger after he is once seen will pay for his negligence with his life. But 1 man is to ride straight back here and report to me. Is that clear?" "Absolutely clear, citizen." "Very well, then. Go and see Gently at once. See the reinforcements start off with patrol duty. Then ask the captain to let you have half a dozen more men and bring them back here with you. You can be back in 10 minutes. Go." Degas saluted and went to the door. As Marguerite, sick with horror, listened to Chauvelin's directions to his underling, the whole of the plan for the capture of the Scarlet Pimpernel became appallingly clear to her. Chauvelin wished the fugitives should be left in false security, waiting in their hidden retreat until Percy joined them. Then the daring plotter was to be surrounded and caught red-handed in the very act of aiding and abetting royalists who were traitors to the Republic. Thus, if his capture was noised abroad, even the British government could not legally protest in his favour, having plotted with the enemies of the French government. France had the right to put him to death. Escape for him and them would be impossible. All the roads patrolled and watched, the trap well set, the net wide at present, but drawing together tighter and tighter until it closed upon the daring plotter, whose superhuman cunning even could not rescue him from its meshes now. Degas was about to go, but Chauvelin once more called him back. Marguerite vaguely wondered what further devilish plans he could have formed, in order to entrap one brave man alone against 20 of others. She looked at him as he turned to speak to Degas. She could just see his face beneath the broad-brimmed cuir's hat. There was at that moment so much deadly hatred, such fiendish malice, in the thin face and pale small eyes, that Marguerite's last hope died in her heart, for she felt that from this man she could expect no mercy. "I had forgotten," repeated Chauvelin with a weird chuckle, as he rubbed his bony talon-like hands one against the other, in a gesture of fiendish satisfaction. "The tall stranger may show fight. In any case, no shooting, remember, except as a last resort. I want the tall stranger alive, if possible." He laughed, as Dante has told us the devils laughed at the sight of the torture of the cursed. Marguerite had thought that by now she had lived through the whole gamut of horror and anguish that human heart could bear, yet now, when Degas left the house and she remained alone in this lonely, squalid room, with that fiend for company, she felt that if all that she had suffered she felt as if all that she had suffered was nothing compared to this. He continued to laugh and chuckle to himself for a while, rubbing his hands.
Oh,
So vain!
Why didn't they put this in the movie? It would have been hilarious.
He continued to laugh and chuckle to himself for a while, rubbing his hands together in anticipation of his triumph. His plans were well laid, and he might well triumph. On a loophole was left, through which the bravest, the most cunning man might escape. Every road guarded, every corner watched, and in that lonely hut somewhere on the coast, a small band of fugitives waiting for the rescuer, and leading him to his death, nay, to worse than death. That fiend here in the holy man's garb was too much of a devil to allow a brave man to die the quick sudden death of a soldier at the post of duty. He, above all, longed to have the cunning enemy who had so long baffled him helpless in his power. He wished to gloat over him, to enjoy his downfall, to inflict upon him what moral and mental torture a deadly hatred alone can devise. The brave eagle, captured and with its noble wings clipped, was doomed to endure the gnawing of the rat. But she, his wife, who loved him and who had brought him to this, could do nothing to help him. Nothing to save to hope for death by his side, and for one brief moment in which to tell him that her love, whole, true, and passionate, was entirely his. Chauvelin was now sitting close to the table. He had taken off his hat, and Marguerite could just see the outline of his thin profile and pointed chin as he bent over his meagre supper. He was evidently quite contented and awaited events with perfect calm. He even seemed to enjoy Brogard's unsavory fare. Marguerite wondered how so much hatred could lurk in one human being against another. Suddenly, as she watched Chauvelin, a sound caught her ear which turned her very heart to stone. And yet that sound was not calculated to inspire anyone with horror, for it was... Stop it! Suddenly, as she watched Chauvelin, a sound caught her ear which turned her very heart to stone. And yet that sound was not calculated to inspire anyone with horror, for it was merely the cheerful sound of a gay, fresh voice singing lustily, "God save the King!"
And that's where it ends, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh!
Wait, what did it say again? Who was it? The last
It
line?
didn't say who it was. There's a voice, cheerful sound of a gay, fresh voice singing lustily, "God save the King."
say we should just keep going, but it's only gonna get worse, so.
Oh my. Okay.
That was suspenseful.
Wait. What about?
We should have died.
What was I gonna say? Okay, Chauvelin is increasingly much more scheming and conniving and creepy.
Wretched.
So what if we have Andrew Scott play him?
Who's Andrew Scott?
Vernon.
Him?
He plays a very good creepy. You saw him as Moriarty.
But only in the comical scene that you showed me.
Well, he plays a very creepy person. He played Hamlet. Come on, he can do he could do this.
Possibly.
Oh my. So, what do you all think of the latest developments? I am very tempted to just keep reading. But I won't. I should abstain myself.
Withhold yourself.
Yeah. That's not right either. It's
I shall withhold myself.
oh no. Withhold it from myself. I hide the book. Which we almost didn't find it this morning when we were trying to find it. Anyways. Oh my. She has very good titles of her chapters.
Oh, it's so frustrating. She just draws it all out so long.
Well, but it's all
Whereas
worth it
Orczy
though.
does, I mean.
It's all worth it though because you would go through their thought process. That's what I love about books or other stories or whatever. Is you get to go through the thought process and it's like you're actually there living it with them.
Yeah, I guess. I know, but it's just so long and just like, it's gonna die, what's gonna happen? Just get it over with.
Good things come to those who wait.
And also bad things could come to those who wait. Lie in wait.
Yeah. Oh dear.
That hideous hole sounds very
Hideous. I know. Yeah. I think it's interesting how with a fast wind they could make it to Cali in a half an hour. And, nowadays, but, because the English Channel isn't, I guess that was their crossing, right? The English Channel.
There's just something hilarious. I know it's, I know it's not hilarious, but there's just something hilarious about them all just showing up after Suppressy. Suppressy has no idea what's going on. And he has all these people in search for him and dressing up as different things. In different costumes, in disguises. And all showing up at this place that he just left. And all waiting for him to come back. And all, one's cackling about him and one's crying upstairs and biting her nails off, And Sir Andrew's out there, looking for him.
Oh dear, Sir Andrew's gonna come back.
And he'll probably see the Chauvelin stop or something.
How could he?
He will.
Hmm.
No, it's just hilarious. What was I gonna say?
You never know.
Oh, I wonder if, I was gonna say Senor Brogard. Monsieur Brogard. I wonder if he's on anyone's side. Is he just pretending to be
I think he's an indifferent peasant.
an indifferent peasant?
Yes.
I think he's an indifferent peasant.
Because I think he would have recognized Sir Andrew, number one.
Well, maybe he doesn't recognize him on purpose.
No, he's a bit too...
Maybe he's supposed to be like
And
that.
Sir Andrew is acting, when he said the awful brute for, being so rude or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I don't think
Okay.
he's on their side. I
Alright.
don't think though either that he's on Chauvelin's side necessarily, because
Yeah, it says
Chauvelin wanted him out and wanted to make sure he wasn't listening.
Yeah, and also you see that he showed more contempt for him, these visitors, Chauvelin and the secretary,
That's
than for him.
That's because he thought
Yeah.
he was a cure at first.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. Anyways. So is this Degas fellow like the Poisson from the movie? That's what I was thinking.
Oh, so who?
Well,
A bit headstrong, perhaps, but I suspect he'll go far. What did you want?
the bookmark. Bookmark. Well, that seems to be all I can think of to say.
How helpless she must feel to be able to do anything, you know, to
Yeah.
help. Therefore, she is helpless.
Not even that. Not even she. Yeah. Well, yeah, she can't do anything to help him. But when she does find him,
How I wish I'd taken fencing lessons!
even when she does find him and gets a chance to talk to him before, everything happens, then he's gonna go off to rescue the Count de Tony, and like you said, face death. No, but how he could not come back from that. Yeah.
What? What did you say?
I said, yes, she feels helpless, but she also is like doubly helpless because even if she does get to see him and say, I love you and I'm sorry and all that, then that
They
doesn't...
still die.
Exactly.
I hate that where the, powers that be, they're soldiers, they say, catch this person or don't let this person escape, but if they do, you're dying because of it. It's all your fault,
It's extra incentive.
But it's terrible because...
Well, yeah.
It's terrible because it may not be their fault. Someone may have craftily, escaped.
Craftily.
I shall craftily escape.
I had just escaped. I shall craftily escape.
You know what I mean? I'm just saying.
Small fryer.
Somebody could outwit, their jailers, their captors.
Right.
So it may not be their fault.
Well, technically it is their fault because
For being
they
outwitted
didn't...
in the first place.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
Anybody can be outwitted.
I suppose.
I'm just saying.
It's just extra incentive because
Well, that's incentive, all right.
obviously you don't want to die. Though it's not really instilling much, patriotic duty or whatever, or, whatever you call it. Loyalty, I guess. That you want to do your job because of your cause or whatever. If they say you're so expendable that we're just going to kill you if you don't do your job right.
Yeah. Well, anyway. Alright, everyone. You're entitled, even more so, to comment this week. Because of what is going on.
Yes. Yes. And thanks to everyone who has commented.
Yes, it's been absolutely lovely.
Yes. Reading them all. I have to respond to one or two. Soon. Anyway. Yes, so we shall see you all next week.
Farewell.
Goodbye.